Welcome, everybody, to Decision-Making Frameworks for Leaders Dealing with Economic Uncertainty. Thank you for being here. We're going to dive right in and respect everyone's time today. And again, thank you. First, we'll get the commercial out of the way because we're able to do this today for you because of the underwriting partnership with emerged.com. If you are a business-to-business focused brand and you are looking to develop business to prospect relationships that are much more targeted and focused than traditional digital strategies, then please check out emerged.com and mention Decisions 2020, and they'll give you a customized list of 2,000 targets without being a customer and work through whether or not there's a fit between you and their partnership. So please check out emerge.com and thank them for putting this on today. Without further ado, let's dive right in. A little bit about me and a little bit about what to expect today so that you can have context for the next 30 minutes or so. My name's Chris, and we're going to be able to chat if you want to submit questions, things like that. You'll be able to do that in the group chat box to your right. You'll also be able to submit polls. Please participate. These will be anonymous polls, but it helps us and helps me direct the content of this webinar more specific to your concerns and your vantage point as it relates today. And then any questions you may have about the webinar, the webinar series, we'll be doing these on a frequent basis, or the platform over at Emerge. You can reach out to Cameron Davis directly at cameron@emerge.com. And certainly feel free to connect with me on both LinkedIn and Twitter at Chris J. Snook. My background in this has been 20 years plus in the executive suite as an entrepreneur, founder, angel investor, dealing with hyper-growth companies, failures, exits, macro and microeconomic cycles at the local level as well as the national or international level. And most importantly, just making good decisions and bad decisions and learning from them. So the best thing about today's webinar is I get licensed to brag and pontificate about how awesome these frameworks that I've chosen to share with you are, because I didn't come up with any of them. I have, through my own practice and through my own life, deployed them and found them to be extremely relevant and extremely valuable. So I'll give you the resources at the end of this where you can dive deeper, but we'll keep this highly pragmatic today. We're going to start off by talking about forces. We'll move into impacts, frameworks, and resources. And it doesn't come as anybody's surprise. The biggest force that we're currently all facing today, whether we are aware of it or not, is what many are calling the black swan event of our generation. Now, whether you think it's a white swan, which means it was predictable and that we should have known better because you've seen the Bill Gates video from 2015, or you've heard and heeded the warnings yourself from multiple different documentaries or things around pandemics and the fact that we are overdue for one. The reality is that for most businesses, for most of you listening to this, and for most of the humans on the planet, the COVID-19 virus and pandemic is the black swan event. It was the thing we didn't expect to happen when it did. And it has exposed the weakness and fragility of our systems, our economic systems, our business cycles, things like that, which are at the end of their 100-year cycle and possibly at the end of a larger macro 400-year cycle. But we're going to hit over 500,000 people with confirmed cases sometime today. These are the data as of this morning, and over 190 of the 195 countries being infected. So this is, by all definitions, a macro force that is globally taking us all by storm. Now, what are some of the disruptions? So what are the impacts of that force? And whether we're dealing with this now or on the other side of it later, the frameworks we're going to talk about and the ability to make decisions accurately will be one of the most important skills that you continue to cultivate. And mastering this will lead to your ability to become a highly compensated individual or remain one as you progress through your career or your social life. Supply chain disruptions are the obvious one. Falling sales. This was my target yesterday in Paradise Valley, Arizona, where I live. That was the toilet paper aisle, as many of you have probably already guessed. And this was the Trader Joe's, where due to some actions by our governor, fortunately very proactive, we are able to go 5 in at a time to most of our retail establishments as of earlier this week. Now, for those of you in New York or California, or a friend of mine down in Grand Cayman today who's been put on a 24/7 curfew, this is a luxury for the next couple of days. But the rapidly rising job loss that is coming and that has already begun will be one of the most devastating impacts, both locally and globally. Travel disruptions have obviously put airlines and cruise lines and just business travel, and also anybody in the corporate meeting space or event space or anything related to that in harm's way as far as a continued business operation. And the follow-on knock-on effects of when these restrictions are able to be lifted and when we are able to contain or flatten the curve, as they say, the knock-on effects will probably last 18 to 24 months at minimum and rear their head in numerous ways. And so what's the thing that we can do? Well, before we get started on what we can do about it, I'd like to just have a quick chance to check in and find out where you are with it. So I'm going to put up a poll here in a second. I'll leave that poll running while I talk through it. But if you can, take 30 seconds and just select the most relevant answer from the drop down for you as it relates to how you're feeling about the current situation and what got you here today. So which of the following decisive actions have you taken in response to COVID-19? I'm going to start that poll now. You should be able to see that on your screen, and just complete that as you can. We'll leave that one up for a second. Thank you for that. I'm going to put the other poll up so that we can also get your answer on what has you most feeling anxious today. So if you can indulge me. Some of the top answers right now coming in are evenly split amongst when will I go back to work? Will my investment portfolio be decimated? Will I have a career or business in the future? I'm assuming, and the nuance between the top one and the bottom one is based on, I know that several of you are probably at the early stages of your career, maybe even in college or university and coming into the workforce for the first time and wondering if you're going to even have an opportunity to work in your desired field. And several of you may be working in service industry businesses or maybe managing people that are, whether it's a retail chain. Many of you may have seen today Cheesecake Factory, which is obviously a well-known restaurant chain globally, and who recently acquired one of the most successful restaurant groups out here last year, Fox Restaurant Concepts in Arizona, that owns about 12 or 15 different amazing concept food restaurants around town and around the Southwest, announced that they across the board will not be paying any of their rent in April, and that they're renegotiating already with all of their landlords. Now, if a company that is in the restaurant business and has been very profitable and has been around since 1972 and has acquired brands that have done very well, like the Fox Concept brands, is saying they don't have enough money to pay rent given the current environment, you can imagine what happens to the ones that are lesser known. You can imagine what the knock-on effects might be. So there's a real threat, and thank you for participating in that. I'm going to keep the slides going and move on, but it helps me understand the context. So I'll do my best to frame these slides within the context of a third of you are worried about career or whether you'll go back to work in your current role, and another third of you are worried about your investment portfolio, and maybe you share those equally across the board. So the bottom line is that you and I need to be able to make decisions. The very act of not making a decision is a decision of itself. The Latin root of decision, the word decision in Latin, literally means to cut off. Now, the mistake would be to think that once I make a decision, I can't make another one. It is not about cutting off your ability to make decisions. It's rather cutting off the optionality or that fork in the road and choosing to go in a direction so that it's very crystal clear on where you're going. So as it relates to investments decisions, it's which positions or which of my portfolio asset classes am I going to decide, am I going to cut off, either by doubling down or going and moving into cash or exiting altogether, or how will I hedge my bets? So these are the ways that you would cut off certain things. Workplace decisions are, am I going to get fired? Am I going to have to lay off people? How am I going to capitalize the business during this periodic downturn or lack of liquidity while things get back on track and while we try and contain the virus? Does that mean getting a loan? Does that mean raising equity, dipping into savings if you're the owner? And then social contract decisions. All of us face potentially new social contracts. What are the things that we've gotten away from that we need to get back to? You've probably been asking yourself this question as you've sat at home and focused in on the things that actually really matter, even though it probably wasn't by choice. It may be by force of less to do. These social contracts that we have and where we've gotten off of our path over the last several decades, or where we've become too focused on our consumerism and our material gains and our hustle, where we haven't looked at the things that really matter, the relationships that really matter. Maybe we've invested too much time in things that aren't core to our personal values. So these are the things that will happen, and they'll happen at both a micro level with you, and they'll happen at scale in your community, and new things will emerge from this. So these are the different types of decisions you'll face. Let's dive into the frameworks. I've bucketed these. There's more than we're going to go through today. We're going to focus on 6 today. I'll talk about that in a second. But these are some of the top ones. You can Google these or look into these on your own. As it relates to taking action and daily prioritization, the two that I like the most are the Eisenhower Matrix and what's called the Project Portfolio Matrix. We'll talk about those in a second here. As it relates to dealing with dilemmas or frameworks for crisis, there's the rubber band model, the consequences model, the conflict resolution model. We're going to talk specifically about the rubber band model today for the sake of time, but I encourage you to look into the resources and references on those other ones that I'll throw up at the end here, because I think they're complementary to each other and highly relevant, both long-term, but also in the current environment. As it relates to yourself and self-awareness, we'll talk about the flow model and the personal performance model. Some of you may or may not be in tune with the Johari window. It's another great framework that I recommend looking up and walking through the exercises on. And then as it relates to the other side of the equation, understanding others, because none of us are in this alone, and none of us can get where we're trying to go without other people, whether they be our family members that we're trying to get on board or that are trying to get us on board, and whether it's our coworkers or our employees or our boss. So we'll talk about Tony Robbins' 6 human needs model, and I've adapted it a little bit visually over the years. So I'll give you my version of it, but the roots of it are from him. And then extreme leadership and the LEAP framework is a great one. We're not going to have time to get into today, but I'll give you the references for that too, for those of you who are in charge of culture, HR, or things of that nature, and looking for a model and a framework that you can use both now and in the future to cultivate extreme leadership across your organization, regardless of the title and the role of the person in question. So let's talk about the 6 that we're going to go through. Eisenhower we will start with. The Eisenhower Matrix is simply about working more efficiently. So right now, it's really important that we can figure out, because when things are up in the air and when everything seems to be uncertain, a lot of times everything feels important. And certainly everything feels urgent, or some things don't feel urgent, but maybe they are. And so Eisenhower came up with this framework way back in the 40s, and it served many people well. And so I'm bringing it back to life here for those who haven't heard of it or have not used it in a while, because it's super apropos, in my opinion, with what everyone's facing at home, as well as the office or the organization, since most of you are working from home. So what is important and not urgent? You graph the things that you have to deal with on a day-to-day or weekly basis by listing them there. Something that's important and not urgent. Something that's important and urgent. Something that's not important, not urgent, and then not important but urgent. So these are the 4 things. Everything's going to fall into one of these 4 categories. If it doesn't, you're not trying hard enough. And the answers are simple. If it's deemed important and urgent, you must do this now. And we'll talk about a simple tool that I use personally and have used for years that I got from Earl Nightingale years ago on an audio tape back in the day, that'll help, tangibly do this on a daily basis. But this is the stuff you have to do. So this is the stuff you're going to do right now. This is the top priorities, anything in that upper right box. Things that are in the upper left box is about deciding when you'll do it once you've mitigated or handled the things in the right box. The stuff in the bottom left, I'm going to say you never do it. Eisenhower Matrix says you'll do it later. If it's not important, not urgent, I don't see why you'd do it. Because it doesn't seem to have any impact to you or your daily life. And not important but urgent is the stuff that you want to delegate to someone else. So this is a very clear 4-box framework, but super powerful if you start to just look through the things that you're tackling today and graph them in this way. How you go about it, how I go about it on a daily basis is I create what's called a daily scorecard. Literally, it's a 3x5 note card you can buy in stacks at any office supply store out there. And I just write down the 6 tasks. So, and I label them UNI, INU, Uni. So obviously urgent and important is the UNI. INU is important, not urgent. Uni is urgent, not important. And so this is an example, but I literally just put, here's my 6 things. These are 6 things I have to get done today. This is how I'm going to attack my day. Some of these are meetings. Some of these are phone calls. Some of these are emails. Some of these are PowerPoint decks that I've got to prep for a webinar. Whatever they are, they get listed and there's 6. And the discipline is to put 6, not because you couldn't do more than 6 in a day, but because if you can do these 6 things in one day, you've crushed your day on the things that matter most to the vector that you're on. If you get all through all these 6 and it's noon, you can choose to take the day off or the rest of the day off, or you can add 6 more. So it's a very fluid way to do it, but it's a great tool and it keeps you focused. And you just throw a line through it. It's super low tech. You can bring it anywhere. I usually put it in the pocket next to my wallet or next to my phone. So I highly encourage you to get a stack of 3x5s. And after you've done the Eisenhower Matrix to graph things, take this out on a daily basis or even the night before and map out the 6 things you're going to do the following day. All right, let's talk about Project Portfolio Matrix. This is where you're going to look at and get a perspective on how you're tracking to plan as it relates to your life or your business. I've put some various examples in here just to kind of illustrate it. Certainly not necessarily a custom persona in here, but essentially there's 6 quadrants, or I'm sorry, 9 boxes, but several quadrants that they break into. But you're going to be looking at whether you overspent as it relates to cost, whether you underspent or whether you're on plan or on budget. That's on the left side there on the left axis. And then as it relates to time, are you late and overdue? Are you on time or are you ahead of schedule? So these are just different examples. In other words, as it relates to your current assessment of your overall portfolio, your life and personal and everything else, if your health and exercise is exactly where you want it to be, it's a priority, you're executing against that, you're meeting those obligations day in, day out, and your metrics are showing it, then you would put it on plan and on time in the middle. If you are writing a blog and you've gotten distracted or you have been overwhelmed by other things that needed to take priority, for instance, from your Eisenhower Matrix, well, then your blog might be late, but on plan as far as budget and time goes, you just may be behind. Quantifying your pipeline, maybe you overspent on how much you thought you were going to bring in, and now things are changing and it's not only late, meaning those receivables or those things haven't come in, but those closes also haven't, and now they're starting to deteriorate. This would be an example of being overspent and overtime. So you get the idea. This is just a way to kind of rapidly look at the portfolio of your personal and business life and the things that are draining time and resources from you, and help quantify where they are, and also help rate whether they're important or not. All right, so now let's talk about the rubber band model as the third framework. This one's good, and I put this one up here versus pros and cons because most of you have heard of pros and cons or used pros and cons before when it relates to making a decision. Pros and cons assumes that there's one that's better than the other based on attractiveness. Pros and cons is a great tool also when you're facing a rock and a hard place situation, which is two undesirable outcomes, neither of which is avoidable, and you have to pick one. Pros and cons is a good way to do that because it's focused on a simple math equation that says, well, this one is going to cost more damage or do less damage than the other one, and so I'm going to go this way. So pros and cons is a framework most of you have probably used informally or formally. This is a version of that, but the rubber band model is specifically for when you're facing two attractive alternatives. Now, you might wonder why I put this one up during a time of chaos, crisis, and uncertainty. And the main reason I did is because I'm of the opinion, and history has proven that during these times, there always ends up becoming a window of massive opportunity. There always ends up being a area that takes off because the sheer size of the problem and size of the crisis creates an equally large void that can be filled by people who are awake, skilled, and ready to take advantage of it. And sometimes when you see those windows, like many of you may already have been starting to address, you realize that you have to choose between two attractive alternatives. So the framework with the rubber band model is about asking two simple questions. Let's say you have two attractive choices. One is your company's going to downsize, but you're critical to that and you're going to take on more responsibility and maybe a slight raise in pay or equity because you're going to be doing more. And that's option one. But you don't necessarily know if that company is something that you want to stay with in the new normal. Maybe you're not sure about the long-term viability of that. And you see this as an opportunity to jump over to another company because there's a brand new role that is an executive level that's a step up that is going to be available. And you now have a way into that and you could get an offer, but it would mean relocating somewhere else. And so this is where you have two choices. One is stay put and get a raise, but maybe not be, excited or be a little bit bored. The other one is, but have stability. And then the other one is level up, but totally uproot your life, right? And so these are things of what's holding you, what's pulling you. And again, similar to pros and cons, but different because you're dealing with two things you're okay with either way. So it's a good framework to use in those situations. The flow model is really about helping you find out both personally and professionally whether you're facing a risk of boredom or whether you're close to burnout. Maybe you're already burned out. This is a good way to validate that and start to figure out how to adjust. So the way that you would approach this is to graph your challenges against your abilities. And if you know what your top three abilities are, these are your professional abilities, these are your interpersonal abilities, the things that you know about yourself that are your superpower. Typically there's, one superpower, maybe 2 to 3 complementary ones that you are and that you've earned at this point in your life or career and that you know about yourself humbly. Well, you want to put those abilities out. If you can code, that'd be an ability. If you are a phenomenal salesperson or marketer, that'd be an ability. If you're a great leader in times of crisis, that'd be an ability. These kind of things. So you list out your abilities, and then you list out the things that you're challenged by, the challenges that you're facing or that your organization's facing, and specifically maybe your top 3. And what this helps you understand is that the difference between being apathetic and not wanting to do anything and going with the flow and being in the flow where you truly feel like you're in the zone and work is play and play is work and you're just crushing it is whether or not your abilities meet the challenges at a level that's in that middle. For instance, if your challenges are too easy for your abilities, you're going to get bored to death and you're going to become apathetic over time and you're just going to, be churning your wheels and feeling unfulfilled. If your current challenges that are facing you because of this or any other stimulus are way over your ability to deal with them and you have zero clarity in how to delegate them, then you're going to get burned out because you're going to be working extra hard trying to do stuff you're not really competent and capable of doing and that you won't enjoy doing. And over time, that will burn you out dramatically from both an adrenal and also a relationship standpoint. So it's a good way to map where you are as it relates to the risk between burnout and bore out. All right, rounding the corner, heading for home. The personal performance model. You've probably seen something like this before, but again, it's how to recognize if you should change your job or your role or maybe even your business model, right? And so what this is looking at is a simple graph. You would put 0 to 10, 0 being in the center point, 10 being out on the fringe near the arrow tips. And it's have to, able to, and want to. And what you would do is you would look at the current tasks that you do, the things you spend the most of your day or week doing. And you'd say, well, where am I on a 0 to 10 as far as the things I have to do and that are demanded of me? Where do they rank on a 0 to 10? How about the things that I'm able to do? Am I able to do the tasks that I'm faced with on a daily basis from a skill? 10 would be, I absolutely can do it. It's right in my strike zone. 0 would be, I don't lack not only the skill, I also have 0 context for understanding the skill or the task at hand. So 0 would be, I'm completely incompetent. 10 would be a home run. It's right in my strike zone. And then want to the extent of your current tasks, how do they map to your goals or what you're working on every day, moving you closer in the direction of your stated goals or your idealized goals or your corporate goals, or are they moving you away? Are they moving you closer to the family and the life that you want at home, or moving you further away? Only you can decide that. But you're going to graph these things, and it helps you understand how in or out of balance these things are. I've put up an example of what the end game would look like, and then gives you direction on where you need to tweak. And finally, the 6 human needs model. Many of you may or may not have become fans over the years or listened to the Tony Robbins stuff, but the 6 human needs model comes out of that. And essentially what you're looking at here are 6 different human needs. I've put them on teeter-totters because there is no such thing as balance. Balance is static, and life is not static. Life is dynamic. But these things can get out of whack. And if they get too far out of whack for too long, they create significant behavioral issues, both in ourselves as well as in others. So why I want you to have this framework in mind is primarily as you observe, which I think right now is a great time to be super curious and super observant of the behaviors, not only of yourself, but of those around you, both in and outside of your immediate circle, because you'll see these things showing up. So without, any shock, I think it's pretty clear that right now, the need that we have for uncertainty is being over-indexed. Every human being has these 6 human needs. We need certainty in our life. We want to know what we can count on, but we also want surprise. We want nuance. We want thrill, right? And so every single one of us will get bored to death if all we know every day is we're going to eat Cheerios for breakfast. No matter how much we love Cheerios, if that's the only option we're ever going to get, that's too certain. So right now, everybody knows certainly that they're in their house and that they have those 4 walls and they're going to be there with those 1 to 3 to 5 people because they're self-quarantining or they're social distancing. And some of you are getting sick of that already. Some of your spouses and you are arguing or getting on each other's nerves over little nuances that normally don't bother you because you know you have nowhere to go. You are certain that right now you are stuck. And you don't know the uncertainty as much as you'd like. The uncertainty of not knowing when that's going to lift has people over-indexed. And so same thing goes for the workplace. The certainty of knowing I've got income or I've got a job is great. But when all of a sudden that gets ripped away and I have no idea if I'm ever going to be able to serve tables again, or if I'm ever going to be able to host another event or sell another sponsorship or whatever it may be, if I don't know if I'm going to have clients on retainer anymore because their business is going to go away and their budgets are going to get cut by 90% or what have you, these levels of uncertainty start to create real panic for people. And so just understand that it's a need, but it's also something that when we overindulge in one or when we're forced into one at a ratio that is not normal for us, that it becomes a problem as much as it is a need. Similarly, significance and love and acceptance are kind of 2 things that are in constant balance with each other or constant flow with each other. Our need to be significant is real. We have to know we matter to who we want to matter to, whatever that looks like. Some of us need to matter to our spouse, to our children, to our boss. Some of us need to matter to society. Social media has exposed our narcissism at levels of scale. We need to feel like we're important, even if we're not. We need to feel like someone's watching, even if we're not a celebrity. And I'm not picking on that. I'm doing the example to allow you to understand why certain things happen, even when they may make no sense at all. Why all of a sudden do you see a lot of people who are not homeschoolers by nature, but have been forced into it, pushing out all kinds of things about their schedule today for their kids and how amazing it is. And it's like this need to be significant because I don't feel accepted or I don't feel loved or I have massive amounts of uncertainty. And so I over-index on the thing I feel like I can get, which is significance. I'm always going to try and fill my needs. And if one is vacant, I will overindulge on another. And so when you're looking at behavior amongst your teammates, amongst your family members, amongst us, realize that they're not being stupid. What they're doing is they're trying to meet their needs. You're trying to meet your needs. Where are you over-indexing on needing to feel loved and accepted? Where are you over-indexing on needing to feel more certain? What are the habits? What are the things that you're doing that may be harming those relationships or may be preventing you from making a decision or influencing someone who you need to make a decision on your behalf because they're more competent at doing it? They are being held back because of the assumptions they're making of where you are. So these are the things that during this time of self-reflection and I encourage you to do. Now, the survival needs are below the line. These are the four that we have to have. If you know Maslow's hierarchy of needs, these four below are where those fit. The two above come when we're able to some way self-actualize, which means our base needs are not being violated. We have enough confidence, enough being met at the base level of survival needs that we're able to both contribute and grow. Now, growth is the pain side of contribution, meaning you can grow by contributing, but a lot of times growth happens most in times of struggle. And so the spiritual side of us, the side of us that is infinite in possibility, but limited in time on this planet in a physical form, that's the side that will use or be forced into growing, whether we like it or not, through times of pain and struggle. This is a phenomenal opportunity to grow, both as an individual, as also as a leader, as a family member, as a teammate, as a company. These are phenomenal times to grow because they're uncomfortable as hell. If you're in a position where you've been able to grow and you're more comfortable, this is a phenomenal time to contribute. If you're liquid, if you have excess capacity in your manufacturing, you're seeing companies do this by shutting down perfumes and cologne lines to produce and manufacture hand sanitizer or N95 masks at scale because they want to help contribute to the solution, right? They're not doing it as a PR stunt. They're doing it because they can and because they're in a position where they feel obligated and also able to contribute and they want to. So these are the 6 human needs. These are the 6 organizational needs that show up through that organization's humans. And this will help you understand what people are dealing with by not asking them, but just by observing their behavior. Someone who is posting more and more and more and more and more on Instagram about how wonderful they're doing in quarantine, or watch my quarantine, or watch my workout schedule, or whatever, is dying for love and acceptance, is needing to be significant because they are bored, they are uncertain, and they don't feel like they don't have any power. And so the only thing they can control is their ability to look like or seek significance or love and acceptance. Some of them may be contributing. There's a PE teacher that got over 2.4 million views on his thing because in his world at this time, he's able to contribute and he was able to rapidly deploy curriculum before even some of the schools could. And globally, he's got kids from kindergarten through 12th grade watching him on YouTube for free. So that's a form of contribution. There's a fine line between our ability to influence and contribute and our need for narcissistic significance. And unfortunately, that fine line is blurred with the very cheap and easily and readily available tools of social media. But it doesn't mean people shouldn't try it. It means you can assess for yourself. All right. So in summary, as we wind down, and I appreciate your time today, and I'm definitely available for questions or any follow-up that you feel like you want to have. An uninvited guest ruined everyone's existing 2020 plans. There is nothing you or I can do about it. That cat is out of the bag, or whatever analogy you want to use. But we can make decisions. We can deploy these frameworks to set new viable paths for ourselves, not through 2020, but far beyond that. Takeaway number 1, it's time to get comfortable being uncomfortable, because nobody's going to get comfortable anytime soon. And that's an opportunity for growth. The other thing I would say is it's going to be okay. And I believe that for those of you who are willing to look at these as they apply to your own life and then model that forward, that it'll be more than okay. It'll be better than before. It's just going to be a little bumpy on the way to get there, and it's going to take a little longer than people want. But things will move. They will move again. The bubonic plague was the precursor to the Renaissance, and we've been dealing with this for 10,000 years that we have recorded history in humanity. And this is our generation and our 3 generations' chance to overcome and show that we can level up in the future. And this is your chance to lead from wherever you are. The resources that you could use to reference some of this stuff or go deeper on some of this stuff are here. A list of books: The Radical Leap, The Fourth Turning, The Watchman's Rattle, Awaken the Giant Within, and The Decision Book. A lot of these actual visual frameworks are adaptations from the phenomenal little handheld book, The Decision Book. I've had it for years. I actually may do a follow-up. I'm trying to reach out to Michael and Roman and get one of them on a fireside chat. So we'll post another one of these when I can do that. But phenomenal books. So you got some time to read, I do that. The dashboard, if you're not using it, that has real-time data on an hourly basis. One of them is listed there. Thank you to emerged.com. Please check them out. Their business is built for this kind of situation, especially as it relates to driving more relevant and qualified leads to business organizations who may be facing massive marketing budget constraints and need to find sales in a consolidating industry. Please check out emerge.com, and you can reach out to Cameron on this email. And then for me, you know how to get me on LinkedIn, Twitter, and my website. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in. I wish you all the best.